Cardiac cycle. It starts with joint diastole in which all four chambers of heart are relaxed. Then tricuspid and bicuspid valves open, blood enters right as well as left ventricle and semilunar valve is closed. SA node generates action potential which leads to contraction of both the atria and this is known as atrial systole. Now, action potential is further generated by AV node plus AV bundle, that is his bundle, which leads to contraction of ventricles known as ventricular systole, and as ventricular systole is happening, atria relaxes. Now, bicuspid and tricuspid valve is closed. Pressure further increases in ventricles which leads to opening of semilunar valves and hence blood is pumped out into circulatory pathway. Then ventricles relaxes which leads to closure of semilunar valve and again bi and tricuspid valve opens and similarly SA node generates the potential and whole of the process is repeated. In total 70 ml of blood is pumped per cardiac cycle. 0.8 second in 0.8 second one cardiac cycle takes place. Let us revise it again. First is joint diastole which leads to relaxation of four chambers. Then SA node generates action potential which leads to atrial systole and which leads to ventricular systole, and when ventricular systole is observed, atria relaxes and when after ventricular systole, ventricles relax, semilunar valve closes and again the process is repeated. There are two heart sounds which are of clinical importance. These are lub and dub. Lub is first heart sound which is observed when tri and bicuspid valves are closed, and dub is second heart sound which is observed when semilunar valve is closed. ECG, electrocardiograph. It is done to study the various phases of this cardiac cycle, that is if cardiac cycle is occurring in a regularized manner or not. It leads to placement of 3 electrical leads, 2 on each wrist and 1 on left ankle, and then the heart or the cardiac cycle is measured on a monitor or a screen. PQRST complex is seen as you can see it in graph. P tells us about electrical excitation, that is contraction of atria, whereas QRS complex tells us about ventricular contraction. Q tells us about the start of systole and T tells us about the end of systole. When we count QRS complex in ECG, we come to know that what is the count of heartbeat, or we can calculate heartbeat rate by counting QRS complex. This QRS complex is also useful in determining the length of systole, and if we study PQRST waves, we can determine if diastole and systole is occurring at equal or regular intervals or not. So here you can see cardiac cycle and ECG.